Clay, I'm not a uniform aficionado the way that you are. I don't really notice. I don't sweat the small stuff is the way that I like to think about it in the air.
Sure.
So you do notice the uniforms than I do. Although I will say my favorite moment, my favorite scene from this episode, which is Cupid's errant arrow, was the DS9 flashback, which I found charming in a lot of different ways, where they're on DS9, so the lighting is different. I like that.
Were they specifically on DS9?
Yeah, they were on DS9.
So they were. Okay.
Yeah. And the lighting was more orange and angular, as it's wont to be. And they're wearing the late season DS9 uniforms in that one, which is kind of a neat callback. And the scene is actually very funny, I think, outside of that. But I don't know if you do you think that the series is like playing around with the uniforms enough? I'm surprised I noticed it really. I think I noticed more DS9 than anything like that. But I do like the show, if anything, just because it can do stuff like that and make it seem seamless in a lot of ways. So it's kind of neat to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I like seeing the throwback stuff like that. They haven't really done much uniform messing around in the present. It's all pretty much straightforward Lower Decks era stuff.
Is it Picard styled? Would you say that the uniforms they wear, are they Picard-ish looking? They have sort of that angular shoulder design.
Yeah, I don't think they're exactly that, but they're probably closer to that than they are to the TNG stuff. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't compare it. But
let's take a break. We are going to play a clip from the episode, and then we'll come back and we're going to break down Cupid's errant arrow.
Well, whatever. It was no big deal. I managed to reverse the polarity and reboot the time stream. Good thing, too, because, 1920 Chicago, nobody's washing their hands.
I love that story, Bun Bun.
Wow! Oh, that's so amazing. And now you date Brad.
I know. I swore I'd never do long distance, but then I met this goofball on Vendu last month. You radiate some primal confidence. I'm sure you felt it.
No, I try not to feel anything around Brad.
All right, so this episode is called Cupid's Errant Arrow. It is the 5th episode of the first season of Star Trek Lower Decks. Came out on September 3rd, 2020. Written by Ben Joseph, directed by Kim Arndt, and in-universe date is 57601.3, which is 2380. In this episode, Mariner is suspicious of Boimler's new girlfriend. Tendi and Rutherford grow jealous of a bigger starship's gear. I think we've settled into what Lower Decks kind of is at this point. I was kind of fearful of this episode. I don't know. I don't think this is quite Mandalorian level yet, where we made a couple episodes into the Mandalorian's first season. We're like, there's nothing to talk about in each episode. It's all very small and like similar to each other. So I don't really know what else you can really add to it. But I think this one sort of clarified to me why maybe this show will never be great if it continues down this track. I think that they pull. I mentioned that DS9 joke that I liked a lot, right? Where she flashes back to meeting a friend's new boyfriend who's the perfect guy, and he turns out to be a shapeshifter that sort of goes crazy and does this like really dark, cynical thing of killing his girlfriend. I know this is a Star Trek show and they can't do it. I really like when they go dark in this show. I think it's like the funniest and most like interesting stuff that they do. And sometimes I think that they pull back. So I like the DS9 stuff. And I was kind of let down that this episode doesn't do a whole lot of stuff with the ex-boyfriend of this girlfriend that he's got. So that like the big black character who comes into this, he's there and it's kind of a joke, but I felt like there's this whole maybe less Star Trek but more funny angle to go with that guy, I was thinking, than anything else. And I was kind of let down by like the Star Trek humor. Is like, okay, it's kind of cute and everything, but I don't know if I'm being unfair. I just think that this show will never be as like cutting or incisive as something like Rick and Morty, really. So it's like it's kind of in this medium area where I kind of wish that they would go farther and darker. I like the transcendence joke from the last episode, and that's very dark. I like the shapeshifter thing. I don't know what you think about it, or if that was something that crossed your mind.
I like this one. I don't know if they needed to do more with the ex-boyfriend, because I feel like then that becomes a different episode. Then it becomes more. They're kind of straddling two sitcom-y tropes here between the cooler ex-boyfriend and the friend who doesn't believe that your girlfriend is all she seems to be.
Yep.
and I think they clearly picked which one they wanted to do. And I think if they did, I don't know. I think the other one would be pretty samey for me. I don't think it would have been super interesting.
Yep.
Whereas the one they did choose, they managed to give it a kind of Star Trek spin, which I liked. I thought it was nice. Again, they're showing that Mariner isn't infallible. She was wrong.
Yeah. Is this the first one she's been wrong? Or I guess she was wrong. She's been wrong a few times.
There was another episode where something she did wasn't exactly what needed to. I forget exactly, but
the hand-to-hand one where she's on the planet with the first officer, and she's not wrong in that one, but he gets the upper hand in it. Right.
Yeah. Which is nice because it allows her overzealousness to be a negative as much as it's an asset. You can play both ways with that element of the character. I continue to really enjoy the Star Trek plots that they do in this show, because I think the blowing up the moon thing and having to relocate a whole race of people or whatever, I thought that was a very Star Trek-y kind of thing.
Yeah. Are these too slight? Are they too slight is my question. Like, the joke works, and I like the build up to the payoff of like, my civilization is 2 people. I just finished the floors. Like, don't blow this up. I think that's fine. I wonder if there's more meat on these bones that is going to waste, because I just feel like you could mine these situations a little bit more than they do. And it's partly a thing of the pacing, which is fast, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's Discovery or Picard fast. It's just fast because it's an animated show and they have to keep moving stuff.
Well, but I think the reason that's probably happening is because the show's called Lower Decks. And so ultimately all of the focus is going to be on the Lower Decks characters. And if they're not directly involved with whatever the overarching Star Trek-y plan is in a direct way, then that's why it ends up getting short shrift. Because I was going to say, this one also continues to wrap, as the other ones have, it wraps that up very quickly. Like once they get to it's just 2 people, that's a funny little button, but then boom, they blow up the moon and everything's back to normal.
Yep.
Which is kind of the same way it's been going previously, whether it's the cure for the zombie thing or the emulsion that turned the ship into trees or whatever. It's all over. It's over very quickly.
You can't, I kind of understand it because they can't stretch the joke. Like, the solution to the joke answer can't be stretched out, because then it no longer works as a joke. It's like, it's like making your punchline 5 times as long as it needs to be. And it's like, that would have been funny, but you could cut it down a little bit. And I think that's what it is. It's just that I think it's kind of similar to the boyfriend and the Mariner plot line, where it feels like they're like including, because the pace is the way it is, they include plot lines that I don't think are totally necessary to anything. And it's like at a certain point, you're just kind of layering on jokes, but I feel like there are certain angles that I would rather go with the show than some things. Like I think on some level, I'm surprised that they have not redone the character pairings. It's always Mariner and Boimler at this point. It's always Rutherford and Tendi. Sure. And so when they do things like they introduce the boyfriend to it, I feel like there's something there that Boimler could do without Mariner being involved in it so directly, as to like being like the only pairing that they have. And I don't know, like there's ways I think to take that thing and spin it in a kind of like more poking fun at Star Trek tropes than it is to have Mariner just be like, something's wrong with this boyfriend or this girlfriend-boyfriend relationship. I don't know. I kind of find myself wishing that they would just settle on something and go through it very thoroughly, I suppose. Sure. And they don't seem to do that as a writing standard on this show.
Yeah. This one's interesting because I feel like Mariner's involved, but the stuff involving the boyfriend, I feel like, is more or less just Boimler. Yeah. Although they don't do they don't spend too much time on it, but
no. To the point of there's not even a lot of jokes about, the sort of stock thing there is that there's Boimler starts seeing all these scenes that make him think that she would rather be with this other boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the implication, but it's not really. You know, they do the very stereotypical comedy thing of like when she sees her old boyfriend, she jumps and he carries her and like swings her around and stuff, and he's like, put her down. They set it up that way, and especially because I think Mariner calls that character like the second coolest person on this ship, so like it's something built in. I know that it's because it's Star Trek, they have to play up the Star Trek tropes of Mariner has to think that something has gone wrong or is fishy here. For Boimler's characterization, I think it makes more sense that he would be nervous about this boyfriend than he is, and he's more nervous about Mariner sort of annoying him or showing something is going to be wrong with his relationship. It's just personal stuff.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like all of his actions in the episode are specifically to counteract the thing with the ex-boyfriend, whether it's him going into the meeting with her and trying to act cool,
but that's not because of the boyfriend, is it? He's just trying to spend time with her, and that character is with her all the time. I never get to say he's never acting tough in front of that guy.
He's never what?
He's never like sort of trying to play himself up in front of that. Yeah, he never treats that character as some kind of a threat and like interacts with him in any way.
I mean, he's trying to make himself look cooler as a direct counterpoint to this cooler guy who's spending all his time with her, because every scene where he does it, that guy is also there, and it usually ends with the girlfriend and the ex-boyfriend like chuckling with each other. Yeah. So it's not, I mean, he doesn't like challenge him to a fight or anything, but he is definitely reacting directly to that guy's presence and the reaction there. The Mariner stuff is he doesn't want her to get involved, but what she's doing is more kind of separate. And I actually don't mind the amount of time they spent on the boyfriend thing, because I'd rather they do the Mariner stuff, just because, like you said, I think the thing with the boyfriend is too standard of a story. So they do a couple things. They have a couple jokes that they manage to Star Trek it up a little bit, but the main thrust of that story is Mariner going nuts, which I think is more. That's more interesting for me anyway, because I found the other side of it fairly stock, and the other boyfriend being there is ultimately part of the payoff of when it turns out that Boimler's got that parasite thing attached to him, where she's like, oh, okay, that's why she thought you were cooler than that other guy. So
yeah. I guess I know that this show can't do it, but I see something to explore in the ex-boyfriend route here. And like in a Star Trek universe, what does it mean to have a neurotic character go up against a breakup that seems like it was Bashir and Lita from DS9, you know, where they're just like, now we're separate. But to have a character who's built in more neurotically interact with that, and have the other characters kind of, you know, this is supposed to be the utopian Star Trek world. Like, you can't be hung up on this kind of thing, but he is in a real sense. I feel like that's the more insightful take into Boimler, but I know that this show is built around playing off Star Trek stuff. So they have to go with the Mariner plot line. I just think those are two different stories is the only thing. Like, I'm not saying that what you're saying is, but they're making a choice. Right. Yeah, they have chosen to do the Mariner thing versus what you're saying with the Boimler thing. Yeah. And the Mariner thing, I don't, for the show to sort of, I think I somewhat understand what early critics are saying. Like, for the show to stand on its own legs, I think that you have to get away from that Mariner storyline at some point. Maybe not now, we're only 5 episodes in, but at some point you have to move away and make the characters have almost more of like a sitcom setup, which is this a very stereotypical sitcom setup, meeting the ex-boyfriend and stuff like that. I think I prefer the show when it does a standard sitcom thing, but then layers it with Star Trek on top of it, as opposed to a Star Trek thing where they try to add jokes into a Star Trek setup. I think that's a better way for the show to go. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out, because I mean, even in animation shows, obviously it's different now that everything has to be better faster because there's so much stuff. But like, even in animation shows, you can realize you need to shift your focus and onto different characters and whatnot, because the Simpsons was the Bart Simpson show for like 2 seasons, and then everybody realized that Homer was the better character.
Yeah.
So then it turned into the Homer show, more or less.
South Park was Cartman's show for a while until
Right.
they realized that Cartman is the antagonist of it, and he's not really Kyle and Stan of it.
So yeah, I mean that stuff can shift. You can move your focus a little bit. I agree with you that I'd like to see them mix it up a bit. I don't dislike the pairings though, because I mean I guess the stuff they did in this episode with Tendi and Rutherford wasn't bad. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, it was fun.
But it was. I can see how if the only thing that they have going with these characters is that they both really like technical stuff, you're gonna run out of stories pretty quick.
It stuck out to me just because Tendi has a line in this one where once it's revealed that they're going to be forcibly transferred to the other ship, she's like, "No, I don't want to leave my friends like Brad and Beckett," and I'm just like, well. They don't really spend that much time together. Like across these episodes, we haven't seen a tremendous amount of interaction or like interplay between a lot of the characters. And it just made me, I'm a little surprised that 5 episodes in, you haven't yet shifted this into Boimler and Tendi and Mariner and Rutherford or something like that. Like the pairing gets mixed up a little bit because, well, I don't think that they've run out of material for the two of them. It just seems like you'd want to explore that angle to see what works at this point, and they just really haven't done it. Like I think you can count on one hand the amount of scenes they've all shared together across the entire 5 episodes. Probably they don't do it tremendously often.
Yeah, they usually end up just kind of they have common area scenes basically, but it's not like they're well.
There's not a lot of 10 forward closing out the episode scenes, which I would kind of expect.
Well,
you know?
No, you're
they
right.
did it in the pilot.
I was going to say they do a decent number of everybody's in their bunks together, but it's not usually like a story ending thing. It's a lot of times I think it's at the beginning and or somewhere in the middle. But yeah, no, I'm sure that they will mix it up a little bit because I think you have to. Because I mean, Bashir and O'Brien wasn't built in a day. You know what I mean?
No, that's a lifetime. They're still building it to this day. I thought this episode was fine. I don't know if it was my favorite. I don't know if it was my least favorite. I liked I think I liked the concepts more than I liked the script in this one. I liked the planet thing was interesting and kind of cute. I like the representation of the aliens is kind of funny. It's like one is like a Long Island 40-year-old woman. You know, it's they're sort of putting on strange personalities onto them, and I like that. I kind of felt like the Boimler girlfriend thing was just a little bit lacking. Really, like I expected something stronger than what they did, and you know that they have to break up by the end. And I thought the Parasite was kind of a cute little twist, but I expected more from it for some reason. It's just, I think it's just the lack of really like cynical cutting or something. Like I don't know. And I know that doesn't really fit this show, but I wonder how much I personally like an animated show that doesn't get a little bit perverse with some of the stuff that it's doing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I honestly have been enjoying it quite a bit. I don't think it's reinventing. I've said it a million times. I don't think it's reinventing the wheel or anything. But as far as a enjoyable cartoon that takes place in the Star Trek world, I'm enjoying. I don't disagree that I think that they can push it a lot further than they have.
Do you think it's in their interest to do that?
Well, I was just thinking. I wonder if that's by decree or not.
Yeah.
If maybe there is some level of control being. Not to sound like a conspiracy theory.
Just brand consistency.
Yeah, brand consistency. Like it's, you know, if CBS hires a guy whose main credit is Rick and Morty to do Star Trek, I have a feeling the people in charge of CBS are going to be a little gun shy. You know, you're bringing this person in, but you're probably going to be like, could we like keep the incest to a minimum?
Yep.
You know, like could we keep the blood? You know, like whatever the harder edge, they're going to be a little bit cautious, I would assume.
I wonder if I'd be complaining I wonder if I'd be complaining if it went the other way. I go, this is a little bit too grim.
True.
I don't need
yeah.
this.
No,
Yeah.
that's the thing too. It's like I don't know if you need to go too far in that direction, because I think when they do, I think they push it the right amount. I don't think they go overly dark. Like that DS9 flashback was nice. That was pretty dark, but I didn't feel like it was overly dark.
Yeah.
And the Ascension thing is dark, but it's not overly dark. It's like it's dark, but it's
surreal
relayed,
enough. Yeah, where it's not.
Yeah, and it's relayed in a way where it's still light enough that it doesn't feel out of place. Because overall, I don't find it to be a cynical show.
No.
So I wonder how pushing it that far into cynicism might be a detriment to what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've got this setup in this Star Trek universe at this certain time in history, would it not benefit you to have a character who was a cynic and see what you can get out of that? You know what I mean? Because everybody else, is Mariner kind of I guess Mariner's probably the closest thing you get to a cynic, right? She's like really,
I wouldn't call her that
cynical.
though,
yeah, she's more cynical about Starfleet, I think, than she is about the world in general.
Yes. Yeah.
So even there, it's like it's not super cynical, but
I think I get this, my point of view from, I think that a lot of the Trek jokes don't land for me. I don't think they're funny. And like there's one here where he makes some offhand comment about like, I'm more hopped up than something than a Q on a Picard day, more what does he say? More anxious than a hopped up Q on Picard day. Yeah, something like that. And it's just like, I don't think it's both not funny and it feels really ham-fisted of like just jam some references.
Yeah.
I noticed those.
The other one that I know, usually that stuff doesn't bother me too much, I think because they say it so fast.
Yeah.
But that one stood out to me. And also when he refers to the ex-boyfriend as a Kirk Sunday with Trip Tucker sprinkles.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, that's a bit of a stretch, but
that felt like, especially to say that because of you don't interact with the character, so it feels like reference for reference's sake there, because that character has like 2 lines of dialogue and you can't really pull anything out of it.
Could you imagine if you referred to your girlfriend's ex-boyfriend as like an FDR Sunday with Ulysses S. Grant sprinkles or something? I don't know if that would really land in real life the way it does on the show.
Everyone you'd say that to would say, well, you must love him then. Like, that's true. He is a hero. I don't like those. I don't really like those jokes just because they kind of take me out of it. And I guess there's a fine line between what I think works in that regard, which is kind of the whole saving the planet joke here, I think works. And inverting it somewhat works. Like I like less obvious jokes. There's a joke where Tendi and Rutherford are trying to run away from that other engineer, and they go through the Jeffries tube, and the guy just runs down the hallway next to them and catches up with them. I like subtle stuff like that. I think that's kind of funny. And I semi-like the turn of this guy doesn't want to work on a serious starship anymore. Like that's the reason he's done it. I didn't think that B-plot was great, but it was serviceable, I suppose. But I thought that twist at the end was fine.
I still enjoy Tendi and Rutherford as characters, so I think their enthusiasm is infectious enough to get me through that plot. Yeah.
I like Rutherford's voice actor. I think he's my favorite voice out of all of the characters on it. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like I feel like there's so again, maybe they'll get into it. It's only 5 episodes in, but I'm surprised that they haven't used these characters more directly in these Star Trek stories that they're telling. Again, it's lower decks, so they're by nature they are side players. But like I'm shocked that they haven't done something where like Rutherford wants to upgrade his cybernetic implant, but he accidentally uploads like Borg something, something like that, where it's like these characters end up playing into the plot instead of being very reactionary to what's going on.
Yeah,
because having them on the sidelines the way you do, you are stuck doing sideline humor stuff, which is fine to an extent, or you end up doing the more sitcom-y plots that have a Star Trek veneer painted on them, which is what they did in this one.
Yeah.
So it's like I think that's the kind of thing that they have to dial in, is like, if these are going to be your main characters, how are they going to be if you're trying to send up Star Trek, you've got so much Star Trek baked into just these 4 characters that I think you can get a lot out of them without relegating them to a side post.
Yeah. Yeah, I would expect. I'm not married to this concept of lower decks where they have to be separated, but I would like more scenes of them on the bridge while the senior officers are there, like at least 1 or 2 of them being involved in something like that. Yeah, because I think the show at this point is somewhat inconsistent with how it portrays the senior officers too. I don't think that the show knows what the best way to play them as is, because the guy's name is not Jack Reacher. What's the first officer? Ransom. Jack Ransom. He seems to flip-flop between whether or not he's kind of a serious Star Trek character or if he's a goofball, like a parody version of it. The captain kind of feels the same way. But I would like them to be more mixed into the Star Trek plots, I think, down the line. Because I don't know the satisfaction I'm going to get from them doing sitcom plots with these characters is going to be, because I don't think the show supports that really.
Well, I'm actually kind of surprised, and obviously this is baked into the show from the get-go, but I'm kind of surprised that the senior officers get as much screen time as they do, because in my head, a Lower Decks show, if I were to conceptualize that, you probably wouldn't even see the captain.
Yeah.
Like the captain would exist
just voiceover,
voice over the computer.
Or like a Charlie Brown head where they walk into the red room, but the camera is cutting off the captain's head, from behind them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If anything, it's a good role to get someone famous to be the captain who has like 5 lines across 10 episodes or something.
Right. Yeah.
But like, or when they're on the bridge, you're only seeing it from like behind the senior staff stuff.
Right.
That then feels a little bit more focused as to, this is a story about Lower Decks and what they do and how they interact and all that kind of stuff.
Senior officers here carry plots frequently.
Right.
They carry the entire C plot.
One of the things I was going to say was, I get the feeling at times that they wish they were just doing a senior staff show.
Yeah. Right.
Because their Star Trek plots are good, and I think that they get good jokes out of them, but they are always through the eyes of the senior staff, where they should probably always be through the eyes of Lower Decks.
Yeah.
So whenever they do these Star Trek plots, I'm like, this is actually a good story. I think they could get they could get more out of this. It makes me feel like they kind of wish that they were just doing a regular Star Trek show, but it was a comedy.
Yeah. And I think if you took the senior...
I don't know. Maybe it shifts that way. Maybe that's what it turns into.
Right. Yeah. They all, the Lower Decks characters just fade away.
Everybody gets promoted.
I kind of see that, because the senior staff seems like more of the jokes that they want to write. I think personally, if I was creating this and writing this, the Lower Decks crew would have the personal storyline, the sitcom, what we're calling sitcom setups, which are like, they're not really Star Trek stories. They're just stories that apply to a whole bunch of characters but are set in this universe. I wonder if they need to do a better job dividing it. I just don't think that they do the jokes in that world as well as they do the Star Trek jokes at this point. Maybe the Star Trek ones are easier because they know what they're working with in that way, but they don't really know what they're working with in terms of the characters at this point when they're writing this stuff. It's because I think that for me, there's enough juice behind it, just sort of making a parody of a Star Trek mission, that there's enough comedy in there where I think you have to work really hard to make me care about a story that's not Star Trek backbone of something, right? Like this dating storyline.
Yeah. And I think they're doing an okay job as far as that goes, because all of the Lower Decks quote unquote non-Star Trek-y stories that they are telling are linked to the larger Star Trek problem in some way. It's not just a one-off for the sake of doing a one-off. Like in this case, Boimler's girlfriend is working on the calculations to regarding the moon implosion or whatever. And Tendi and Rutherford are scanning shit on the Vancouver for similar reasons. So they are linking them. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would prefer them to be a little bit more interlinked. Because in this one, this is the first one where the at least that I'm remembering, where the lower decks crew is not involved with the resolution of the problem. Because usually
of the sci-fi problem,
of the Star Trek problem, yeah. Both of their stories are operating independently from this moon plot that's going on.
Yeah, it is a C plot. They're totally divorced from it in a lot of ways.
Yes,
it's not.
Yeah. They are tangentially associated with it, but nothing that happens between Boimler, his girlfriend, and Mariner has any bearing on anything. Nothing that Tendi and Rutherford do has any bearing on it. I'm not saying it has to every time, but those ones do seem like the more well-written ones where it's like, oh, clearly they've written this so there are payoffs to the larger thing involving the lower decks guys, and it doesn't just feel like they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I'd agree with it.
Still figuring it out.
We'll call it a day there. That's Cupid's Errant Arrow. We don't do the ratings or anything like this.
And if it seems like I'm being too easy on this show as compared to maybe how I reacted to Picard and Discovery, I would say the difference is these shows are still well written. They're like, I don't find anything structurally wrong with these things. The stories they're telling are good for the most part. There's
no weird decisions in this. You know, like what the hell are they doing? It's kind of a failed execution at most. If you like, it's like, it could have been funnier, but it's not I can't believe they did that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it a failed execution because that implies that they did something like wrong or something didn't work. I think everything generally works. I think they can probably push it further and they can probably lean into stuff more, but I don't think they're actively doing bad stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree. I imagine that they will have to push it somewhere because there's only so much longer you can get out of these like Star Trek references type stuff. And we talked about what it was, but I would also like to see them dig into more making fun of a Star Trek concept in a more, I don't know if a holistic way is the right way, like to really embrace a idea like the Prime Directive and build an episode around it being kind of funny. I think instead of just throwaway jokes about being a Prime Directive. I
actually did like that joke though when he pulled the Prime Directive card and she was like, this has nothing to do with the Prime Directive.
Right. I like that guy's, I think there's room there because I like that guy's joke of like, he's like, they're talking about you can either blow up this moon or that moon. And he just goes, this is an impossible decision. You know, it's just kind of like an over-the-top funny Star Trek reaction.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's room to really move into those kind of spaces.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I think there's room to take a Star Trek plot and just walk through it and pull out the inherent humor of it.
Yeah.
You know, and any of those. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is like that Enterprise episode where Archer and Trip go down and play naked lacrosse with the Kurgan. Like I feel like just watching that episode, you could go, what if we just did this and just pulled out all of the humor innate to this concept?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room for that. Because the other thing is, I do find so far the aliens they've come across to be kind of samey, where they're all kind of like over the top mad at Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be interesting for them to interact with a species that's portrayed a little bit differently.
Yeah, they have a lot of leeway with the animation that they look different, but we've either seen animalistic beast alien or sort of like bureaucratic hand-wringing aliens who are just kind of like sort of like nebbish about everything.
Were the guys on the ship this time, those weren't supposed to be the Mick Fleetwood fish aliens, were they?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No, they didn't make a reference to the one thing about those fish have to like stay in stasis or something for their traveling. Yeah. Besides laying down an incredible groove on the drums. I guess that's it. We're done with this one. Cupid's Errant Arrow. That's it. You guys can support the show if you enjoyed the content at patreon.com/thepensky-file. It's much appreciated. And otherwise, all the links are down below. You can check out everything there. There's a Discord channel. If you want to join the Discord, you can do that. I don't think there's really anything else. We'll just be back with the next episode, which I don't know what the title is. They haven't released it yet. And other than that, Enterprise continues. And then you, Clay, do you have anything?
We just had a new Rotten Horror Picture Show come out this past week where we cover Halloween 2018, which is a lot of fun. And next week we have New Badass, which I think it's Harlequinade and House and Garden.
Harlequinade?
No, I'm sorry. Avatar and House and Garden, I believe, which is will be joined by one of the backers from my Bloody Hell Kickstarter is going to come on and chat with us about that.
Cool. That's on the next Badass.
I think it's possible. I haven't looked. It could knowing my track record, that doesn't come out for another month and a half.
Just re-release Bullock for Bullock, and we'll move on. Yes, and you guys did the teaser for Batman, which was out on the YouTube channel at this point.
Where Sean and I talk about our reactions to the Batman trailer, which I encourage you to check it out because this movie's not coming out anytime soon because they just shut the filming down.
I know, he got sick
because Pattinson got COVID, but
something in the way was COVID, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's I was listening to The Ringer talk about that. They were talking about that trailer, just saying it's like it has all of the cliche tropes of a modern trailer at this point. It's dramatic voiceover with a somber version of a pop song that's been redone and like incredibly gloomy sort of stuff going on. But they thought it was fairly effective at that point. I don't know if people care about my thoughts. I thought it was effective. I understand it. And all it really, you made the point about the Batman like showing up and talking to cops. Yeah. To me, it highlights the problem with the darker that Batman gets, the less sense it makes that he looks like Batman in that universe. Like,
depends on how you. I think it depends on how you portray the interactions with people. Yeah.
Right. Well, this movie seems like it's set up as a Seven-esque thriller. Where, you know, the cop's like, God damn it, this guy tore this dude's intestines out through his asshole. And that was like, there's murder riddles everywhere. He's like, what do you think? And he turns and it's just Batman standing in the middle of the room.
Right, exactly.
And it's sort of funny. It's almost like a joke that at that point, you know, if SNL could do a sketch about like, you know, a thrilling new intense crime drama where it's just all that kind of like cops shooting heroin and stuff and then going to this and then they're like, what do you think? And it's just a cheap Batman suit standing in the middle of the room.
Like how you have a scene where Batman shows up to a crime scene in a movie like that is clearly they're going for a certain level of darkness and grittiness, and you don't have Batman interact like exclusively from the shadows of the room or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like he's just hanging out in the middle of the room with the cops.
Right. He's got a coffee. Like a cop gives him a coffee. He's just kind of sitting there and drinking.
Scene later in the trailer where he looks like he gets into a fight with a bunch of cops. So I don't know if he gets arrested or if like they're just all hanging out in the break room at this point.
Yeah, that's the I didn't think it was the downside. It made me sort of laugh when I saw it. I was like, oh, he's really just standing there.
I thought everything else in the trailer was tonally great. I mean, I guess you don't have to listen to my comments now, but I thought everything else in the trailer tonally worked for me, except that one shot where it's just Batman hanging out at a crime scene in full view of all the cops.
Yeah.
But that's also goes into I don't like Batman having an open relationship with the cops either, but that's just me.
Yeah, I haven't. What's the Batman either story, writer, or film or whatever, where the biggest difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne is that Batman is the anger like in full force of Bruce Wayne. Because the way I think of Batman is Batman, to me, I always wonder if there's a flaw in Batman where he's usually portrayed as fairly calculated and cool. Sure. And I wonder, to me, the sense of that character would be that he represents Bruce Wayne's anger at things. Mm-hmm. And so his rule where he doesn't kill is like his last attempt to kind of hold on to something, you know, but he's always on the verge of killing is the way that I should imagine Batman. Like he's like, and then he pulls himself back and he saves whatever humanity is left in him. Is there a story that's kind of the focus of it?
I'm sure there is. I know Sean's Batman is much closer to that, I think, where he's kind of on the edge the whole time. I don't particularly ascribe to, because you can write, that's the great thing about him is you can write him a million different ways and they all work because the core concept is so
Flexible.
universal. It's so specific, but it's also so open that you can interpret it as however you want. And I like the more calculated Well, I have a emotional progression for Batman that I like to think about, but I've always preferred him to be a little bit more calculating than just a bruiser.
Yeah, I guess I never understood his greatest detective moniker. It like
Well, it's because they never show it in the movies anyway. It's because Batman solving crimes on a minute level isn't horribly cinematic.
Yeah, I guess it flies in the face of what I see as his Batman persona. Like if he needs to dress up as this guy, I don't see him doing the detective work dressed up as Batman. Kind of like that. That feels like the Bruce Wayne persona is this sort of rational aspect. And once he gets to the answer, he puts on the costume and just beats the shit out of people, basically.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's never, as far as I know, that's never really been the way that they portray him in that sort of sense. No.
Because does that make... To me, like and we can just end with this, but it highlights the order versus chaos of Batman versus the Joker, right? But I think if Batman is teetering towards chaos that way, the Joker's argument to him is more tempting. You know, like I think he's always kind of tempted by this, especially the Dark Knight story, where it's like, how much chaos can I bring about, and what good does your order do for anybody? But I don't know. It was interesting. I thought about just because the line from the trailer before he beats up those cops, I'm assuming or he beats them up and he says, "I'm vengeance" or something, which I also kind of have a problem. Like, I don't know if someone who does that should then just, I don't know if it's appropriate to just calmly say, "I'm vengeance." You know, like I think vengeance has to be emoted in some kind of way that I think the Batman maybe
I've
isn't.
never been horribly big on that either, just generally, because like my take on I've talked about this a couple times on the Badass Show, is my take on Batman is that he starts out wanting revenge specifically for the death of his parents, but then as he becomes Batman and that turns into its own thing, he then becomes an agent of prevention more than vengeance. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So he's not out there gleefully beating the shit out of people who have already murdered people. He's trying to stop it from happening again.
This Batman is year 2, right? So that would kind of fit.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hoping, is that what they're doing is kind of building this character arc for him, where he goes from very angry young Batman into ultimately what he turns into 2 movies later, if they're going to do 3 or whatever. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that's it. You guys can check out Sean and Clay have more thoughts about that. We just gave the 5-minute version. There's a longer version on YouTube and on the Badass feed. And that's about it. Thank you very much. You can support the show at patreon.com/thepensky file. And we'll be back with the next Lower Decks episode and the next Enterprise episode. See you then.